20 samurai knelt in perfect formation, armor gleaming, clan crests polished to brilliance. Behind them, almost invisible, stood a man with no crest at all. At the front of the great hall, a woman rose from her seat. The daughter of the most powerful warlord in the region. The prize that 20 noble families had sent their finest sons to claim. She walked past the first samurai without looking, past the second, past the 10th, past them all. She stopped before the man with no name. This one. The silence that followed would be remembered for generations. But to understand that moment, you must first understand what came before. The 5 days that revealed who these men truly were. And the single encounter, 1 month earlier, that changed everything. Before we go back 1 month. If you love cinematic stories from old Japan, hit subscribe right now. And I want to test your instincts. If you were Akemi, would you choose the nameless ronin, or the most powerful clan? Comment nameless or power, and tell me why in 1 sentence. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. Matsuda Akemi pulled her straw cloak tighter, watching the road ahead dissolve into mud. She should not be here. The daughter of a daimyo, alone on a mountain path, disguised as a merchant's wife. If her father knew, there would be consequences. But her father did not know. And Akemi had learned years ago that the only way to understand the world beyond castle walls was to walk in it unseen. She made these journeys twice a year, sometimes to the villages that paid taxes to her father, sometimes to the markets where common people traded and argued and lived their small, genuine lives. Always alone, always disguised, always searching for something she could not name. Today, she had found something else entirely. The bandits appeared from the tree line without warning. 4 men, rough-clothed, armed with clubs and rusted blades. They spread across the path, blocking retreat. A woman traveling alone, the leader said, smiling with teeth that were mostly gaps. The mountains are dangerous. You should have brought protection. Akemi's hand moved toward the knife hidden in her sleeve. She knew how to use it. Her father had insisted on that much. But 4 against 1, in the mud, with no room to run. The calculation was not favorable. I have nothing of value, she said, keeping her voice steady. I am only a merchant's wife, returning home. Then your husband will pay to have you back. Or perhaps we find other uses for you first. The men laughed. The leader stepped forward. And then a voice came from behind them. 4 men to rob 1 woman. Your courage is inspiring. The bandits turned. A man stood at the edge of the tree line. He was not young, perhaps 35, with the worn look of someone who had spent years walking roads like this one. His clothes were simple, patched in places. He carried a sword at his side, old but well-maintained. No armor, no crest. No indication of clan or status. Walk away, Ronin, the leader said. This is not your concern. You are probably right. The man did not move. But I find myself unable to do that. Then you will die with her. Perhaps. The word hung in the rain, simple and unafraid. The leader gestured. 2 of his men moved toward the stranger, while the other 2 kept Akemi trapped. What happened next took less than 10 seconds. The ronin moved with an economy that Akemi had never seen, not even in her father's best warriors. No wasted motion. No flourishes, just precise, devastating efficiency. The first bandit swung his club. The ronin stepped inside the arc, drew his sword, and cut in a single motion. The man fell. The second hesitated. That hesitation cost him his life. The leader and his remaining companion looked at their fallen comrades, then at the ronin, whose blade dripped red in the rain. The woman is not worth dying for, the ronin said quietly. Leave. They left, running into the forest without looking back. The ronin cleaned his blade on one of the fallen men's clothes and sheathed it. Then he turned to Akemi. Are you injured? No. She was surprised by how calm her voice sounded. Thank you. The road ahead is dangerous. Where are you traveling? The castle town. Half a day's walk. I will accompany you to the edge of the territory. After that, you should be safe. He had no idea who she was. And in that ignorance, Akemi would learn more about him than any formal introduction could reveal. They walked in silence for the first hour. Akemi studied him when she thought he was not looking. He moved like a man accustomed to walking, his feet finding solid ground instinctively. He did not try to make conversation, did not ask questions. Simply walked beside her, alert but not tense. Finally she spoke. You killed 2 men for a stranger. Why? He considered the question as if it deserved serious thought. Because they would have hurt you, and I was there. And I could stop it. Most men would have walked away. It was not your fight. Most men tell themselves many things to avoid inconvenience. He shrugged. I have found that what we do when no one is watching is who we truly are. I could not have lived with myself if I had walked away. Even though you risked death, death comes for everyone. How we face it, what we risk it for, that is the only thing we control. Akemi was silent. She had heard samurai speak of honor her entire life. Grand speeches, elaborate philosophies, codes recited like poetry. This man spoke of it like breathing. Something he simply did, without needing to name or justify. What is your name? She asked. I am no one of importance. Everyone has a name. I had one once. It belongs to a different man now. A man who served the Lord, followed orders, believed in things that turned out to be lies. He paused. That man died. What walks beside you is something else. Something without a name. That seems lonely. It is. But it is also free. They walked another hour. The rain slowed, then stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, turning the wet leaves to silver. Near the boundary of her father's territory, the ronin stopped. This is where I leave you. The patrols will find you soon. You will be safe. Akemi hesitated. She should offer him something. Money, food, a place to stay. Her father would reward him handsomely for saving his daughter's life, but something stopped her. If she revealed who she was, the moment would change. He would become deferential, calculating. The honest man would disappear behind the mask that everyone wore in the presence of power. Thank you, she said instead. I will not forget what you did. Forget it easily. It was nothing. It was not nothing to me. He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment, something passed between them. Not attraction, not romance, recognition. 2 people seeing each other clearly, without pretense. Then remember it however you wish. He bowed slightly. Travel safely. He turned and walked back the way they had come, disappearing into the forest without looking back. Akemi watched until she could no longer see him. She had not asked his name again. Perhaps because she understood, somehow, that names were not what mattered. What mattered was what a man did when he thought no one important was watching. 3 weeks later, her father summoned her. Matsuda Kenshin was 58 years old, a warlord who had built his domain through equal measures of military skill and political cunning. He loved his daughter in his way, which meant he saw her as both child and asset, often unable to separate the two. The time has come, he said without preamble. You are 24. I have delayed as long as wisdom permits. Now we must secure alliances for the future. Akemi had known this day would arrive, had prepared for it her entire life. You are arranging my marriage. I am allowing you to choose your marriage. Kenshin smiled, pleased with his own generosity. The 20 most powerful clans in the region have been invited to send representatives. They will demonstrate their qualities over 5 days. At the end, you will select one, and if I find none of them suitable, you will find one suitable. That is the nature of duty. Akemi considered arguing, considered explaining that she had spent years watching these noble families, seeing behind their polished facades to the rot beneath. Considered telling her father that she would rather live unmarried than bind herself to men she had already judged unworthy. She said none of this. I understand, father. I will observe carefully and choose wisely. I know you will. You are my daughter. He dismissed her, already turning to other matters. Akemi walked back to her chambers, her mind working. She could not refuse the selection, could not escape her duty as a daughter of a great house. But she could, perhaps, shape the outcome in ways her father had not anticipated. The 20 families would send their best, their most handsome, most skilled, most polished representatives. Men trained from birth to perform nobility, but the performance was not character. And Akemi had learned to see the difference. If she was to be sold, she would at least ensure she understood exactly what she was being sold to. The first samurai arrived on a morning bright with autumn sun. His retinue stretched half a mile down the road. 40 servants, 12 attendants, 8 guards. Banners flying the Ogawa crest, 3 cranes in flight against a field of blue. Ogawa Noboru dismounted at the castle gate with the practiced grace of a man who knew he was being watched. Tall, handsome, with the easy confidence of someone who had never been denied anything. The favorite before the competition even began. By noon, 5 more had arrived. By evening, 12. By the end of the second day, all 20 were installed in the guest quarters, their banners creating a forest of color in the castle courtyard. Akemi watched from her window as each one arrived. She noted who traveled with excessive retinues and who traveled light, who treated their servants with respect and who treated them as invisible, who looked at the castle with calculation and who looked with genuine appreciation. Small details. The kind most people ignored, the kind that revealed everything. The formal welcome banquet gave Akemi her first opportunity to observe them together, 20 men, each trying to outshine the others. The conversation was a careful dance of veiled boasts and subtle competitions. Who had won what battle? Whose lands were most prosperous? Whose lineage stretched back the most generations? Akemi sat at her father's side, saying little, watching everything. Ogawa Noboru dominated the conversation, as expected. He had the presence of a natural leader, the kind of man others instinctively followed. His stories were entertaining, his compliments to her father perfectly calibrated. But Akemi noticed other things. When a servant stumbled while pouring sake, Noboru's face flickered with irritation before smoothing back to charm. A micro-expression, gone in an instant, but she had seen it. Hayashi Takumi, the second son of a powerful family, spoke eloquently of honor and duty. His words were perfectly chosen, his delivery flawless. But when he addressed the servants, his tone shifted, becoming clipped and cold. One person for the nobility, another for those beneath him. Seto Kenji, older than the others at 40, spoke less and observed more. He reminded Akemi of her father in his younger years, calculating, strategic. He was here not for love but for alliance, and he made no effort to pretend otherwise. At least that was honest. The others blurred together. Variations on themes she had seen all her life. Men who had been taught to perform nobility without necessarily possessing it. None of them knew she was assessing far more than their words. On the third night, Akemi put on the clothes of a servant and walked through the guest quarters. It was a risk. If anyone recognized her, the scandal would be immense. But she had been doing this for years, and she never did it alone, not truly. Over the years she had built a quiet web of eyes and ears that people never feared. Ladies-in-waiting who heard pillow talk, stable hands who listened while tightening saddles, clerks at the temple who noticed what names appeared in donation ledgers. Akemi didn't collect rumors to feel powerful. She collected patterns, then confirmed them when she could. She knew how to move, how to keep her head bowed, how to become invisible to those who never looked at servants anyway. One night, a voice stopped her mid-step. "You!" Akemi froze with the tray in her hands, her fingers steady even as her pulse betrayed her. The samurai had turned in the corridor, his shadow long on the floorboards. Noboru. His gaze narrowed. "I don't recognize you," Akemi lowered her head even further, letting her hair hide her eyes. "Forgive me, my lord. I am new to the kitchens." He stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell sake on his breath. His fingers caught the edge of her sleeve, not hard, but possessive. "Lift your face." Akemi tilted the cup she was carrying just enough. Sake spilled, darkening the wood with a soft splash. "Ah," she whispered, stumbling back, all apology and panic. "I'm so sorry. I will clean it at once." Noboru clicked his tongue in disgust, releasing her sleeve as if she had stained him. "Clumsy." He turned and walked on. Akemi waited until his footsteps faded. Then she exhaled once, quietly, and resumed her work as if nothing had happened. It wasn't luck. It was rehearsal. She carried a tray of sake, refilling cups, and clearing dishes. Moving through the rooms where the samurai relaxed after the formal activities, where they thought no one important could hear. What she heard confirmed her worst suspicions. In Noboru's quarters, she heard him speaking with two of his companions about her. The daimyo's daughter has a reputation for intelligence. They say she reads philosophy and studies strategy. A woman who thinks too much is trouble. You will have to break her of that. Noboru laughed. Every horse can be tamed. It simply requires knowing which bridle to use. Akemi's hands did not tremble as she refilled their cups. Her face remained blank, properly subservient. But something cold settled in her chest. In Takumi's quarters, she witnessed him berating a servant who had brought the wrong tea. "Are you stupid or merely incompetent? In my household, servants who fail are beaten. Consider yourself fortunate that you belong to Lord Matsuda." The servant bowed, apologizing profusely. Takumi dismissed him with a wave that carried more contempt than any words. In Kenji's quarters, she found something different. He was negotiating with one of his advisors, discussing what concessions he would demand after the marriage was secured. The Western trade routes are essential. An influence over the military appointments. The daughter is merely the key to the door. What matters is what lies beyond it. Honest, at least. Ruthlessly, coldly honest. 3 nights, 20 men. A catalog of cruelty, arrogance, and calculation, hidden behind polished facades. Akemi returned to her chambers each night with the same conclusion. She could not marry any of them. But she also could not refuse outright. Her duty as daughter made that impossible. There had to be another way. The formal demonstrations began with martial skills. Each samurai would perform kata with the sword, demonstrating technique and form. Then paired sparring with bakken, showing practical combat ability. Akemi sat in the observation pavilion with her father and the senior advisors. She was expected to watch with appreciation, to be impressed by displays of strength and skill. She watched instead for what happened between the movements. The small moments that revealed character. Noboru performed brilliantly. His kata was flawless, his sparring aggressive and dominant. When he defeated his opponent, he raised his bakken in triumph, playing to the crowd. He did not help his opponent rise. Did not acknowledge him at all. Simply turned to receive the applause of the nobles. Takumi was nearly as skilled, his technique precise and controlled. After defeating his opponent, he offered a formal bow, correct in every detail. But the bow was hollow, a ritual performed without meaning. Kenji fought economically, without flourish. He won his match efficiently and sat back down as if the whole exercise was a distraction from more important matters. 20 men, 20 demonstrations. Skill displayed in varying degrees. Not one of them showed genuine respect for the men they defeated. Yabuzame, mounted archery, was the traditional test of a samurai's complete martial ability. Horse, bow, and rider moving as one. The course was set in the castle's outer grounds. 3 targets at increasing difficulty, to be struck at full gallop. Again, Akemi watched for what the demonstrations did not intend to reveal. 3 horses were injured during the trials. One samurai's mount stumbled and came up lame. Another pushed his horse too hard. leaving it exhausted and trembling. A third struck his horse when it refused to jump, the blow hidden from the judges but visible from Akemi's elevated position. None of the three checked on their animals afterward. The horses were led away by servants while the samurai complained about poor training and inadequate mounts. Noboru performed flawlessly, his horse fresh and responsive. But Akemi noticed how he spurred the animal harder than necessary, demanding perfection through force rather than partnership. After the demonstrations, she walked through the stables, disguised again as a servant. She asked the stable hands which samurai had come to check on their horses. "None, my lady." The old stable master looked at her strangely. "Why would they? Horses are tools. These are important men." Akemi thanked him and walked away, her assessment growing clearer with every observation. The rest rode and fired too, some missing, some striking clean, all of them demanding speed over care. Their arrows hit the targets. Not one of them returned to the stables to check the animals that carried their pride. The morning of the third day brought the demonstrations of wisdom. Formal debates on strategy, philosophy, and ethics. Each samurai would answer questions posed by the senior advisors, demonstrating education and intellect. Akemi had prepared questions of her own, which her father had agreed to allow. He thought she was testing their knowledge. She was testing something else entirely. But before the debates could begin, a commotion arose at the castle gate. A man had appeared, requesting permission to participate in the selection. He had no retinue, no armor, no banner. Just worn traveling clothes, an old sword, and the quiet presence of someone who expected nothing but asked anyway. The guards had laughed at him. The samurai in the courtyard had mocked him openly. But word reached Kenshin, and the warlord was curious enough to allow the man to enter. Akemi heard the commotion and came to her window. The moment she saw him, her breath stopped. The ronin from the mountain road. The man who had saved her life and vanished without asking for anything in return. He stood in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by 20 samurai in brilliant armor, and somehow he was the one who seemed complete. They performed nobility. He simply existed within it. Kenshin came to the balcony, looking down at the strange figure. "You wish to compete for my daughter's hand?" "I wish to participate in the demonstrations, my lord. Whether I am worthy to compete is for you and your daughter to decide. You have no clan, no name, no land. What could you possibly offer? Only myself. I understand that is not much by your standards. But I have learned that sometimes what seems like nothing is more than what appears to be everything." Laughter rippled through the courtyard. The 20 samurai exchanged glances of amused contempt, but Kenshin did not laugh. He studied the ronin with the calculating gaze that had made him a successful warlord. "You have courage, at least. Or foolishness. Often they look the same." He paused. "Very well, you may participate. Consider it entertainment for my guests." "Thank you, my lord." The ronin bowed, deep and formal, then moved to the back of the assembled samurai. He did not try to join their ranks, simply found an empty space where he would be least noticed. From her window, Akemi watched him settle into his position. He did not look up, did not know she was watching, but she knew. She knew who he was. And now she would discover if who he had been on that mountain road was who he truly was, or merely a performance for an audience of one. The test of wisdom would reveal more than any of them anticipated, but not in the way the samurai expected. The debates were held in the great hall, each samurai taking position before the assembly to answer questions from the advisors. Akemi had been granted permission to pose one question to each candidate. Her father thought it would help her feel invested in the process. He did not know how she intended to use that privilege. The first samurai gave expected answers. Honor is loyalty. Duty is obedience. The Bushido code is the highest guide. The second was the same. The third. The 10th. Polished responses that said nothing. Words chosen because they sounded correct, not because they were believed. Then Noboru took his position. "The most important virtue for a samurai," he declared in response to the first question, "is loyalty to one's lord. Without loyalty, there is no order. Without order, there is no civilization." The advisors nodded approvingly. Akemi spoke. "Ogawa-san, I have a question. I would be honored to answer. My lady, if your lord ordered you to do something you knew was wrong, what would you do?" A ripple went through the hall. This was not a standard question. Noboru's smile remained fixed, but his eyes flickered with calculation. A true lord would never order something wrong. And a true samurai trusts his lord's wisdom above his own. But if he did, then I would obey. Loyalty is absolute. To question one's lord is to destroy the foundation of honor itself. Akemi nodded as if satisfied, but she had her answer. A man who would do anything he was told, as long as the one telling held power over him. Takumi gave a similar answer, wrapped in more elegant philosophy. The samurai's judgment is limited by his position. The lord sees what the samurai cannot. To disobey is to place one's own limited understanding above the greater vision. More agreement from the advisors, more hollow words. Kenji was more direct. "Obey first, advise after. If my advice is ignored, I have done my duty. The consequences belong to my lord." At least he was honest about his pragmatism. Then the ronin stepped forward. The hall grew quiet with anticipation. What could a nameless wanderer possibly say that would match the eloquence of clan-educated samurai? The first question came from an advisor. "What makes a man honorable?" The ronin considered for a moment, as if the question deserved genuine thought rather than a rehearsed response. "Doing what is right when no one is watching." Some laughter. The answer was too simple, almost childish. But Akemi noticed that the ronin had said something none of the others had. Honor was not about the audience. It was about action without a witness. Another advisor asked, "What is the greatest virtue?" "I do not know if I can answer that. Different moments require different virtues. Courage when facing danger. Patience when facing frustration. Kindness when facing suffering. Perhaps the greatest virtue is knowing which one is needed." More murmurs. The answer was strange, unconventional. Not wrong exactly, but not what anyone expected. Then Noboru spoke from his position among the samurai, not waiting to be recognized. "A man without a lord, without a clan, without name. What honor can such a man possess?" The hall fell silent. The question was an insult barely disguised as inquiry. The ronin turned to face him. "A man with a lord serves his lord's will. A man with a clan serves his clan's traditions. A man with a name serves his name's expectations." He paused. "A man without these things is perhaps the only one free to serve what is simply right." That sounds like poetry for beggars. Perhaps. But a beggar who chooses not to steal is more honorable than a noble who chooses not to share. Silence again. Noboru's face reddened, but he could not respond without seeming petty. Finally, Akemi asked her question. "Ronin-san, why did you come here? You have nothing to gain and everything to lose. What made you enter this competition?" The ronin met her eyes. Did he recognize her? She could not tell. His expression revealed nothing. "I saw 20 men arrive with banners and retinues, speaking of honor as if they owned it. Something in that troubled me enough to act." He paused. "Perhaps I wanted to see if a man without a crest could stand in the same room as men with crests and not be lesser for it. Perhaps I wanted to remind them, and myself, that honor is not inherited. It is chosen, moment by moment, action by action." He bowed. "Or perhaps I am simply a fool who does not know his place." Akemi did not smile. But something in her settled, like a question finding its answer. After him, the debates continued, one polished answer after another. Akemi listened, but every speech sounded borrowed, like virtues worn for a ceremony and returned before dusk. That night, Akemi stood behind the shoshi screen of her father's study. Listening to the brush of ink and the silence between decisions, Kenshin did not look up. "You saw something today. I saw men who speak of honor as if it belongs to them," Akemi said. "And I saw one man who treats it like a choice." Kenshin set the brush down. "Choosing him will anger every banner in my hall." "I know. Not embarrassment," Kenshin corrected, his voice quiet. "Danger. If you break their expectation in public, you become the blade that cut them. They will not forgive a girl for humiliating them. They will look for ways to punish you without calling it punishment." Akemi's throat tightened. "I will not be treated like rice." "Not once." Kenshin studied her through the paper screen, as if measuring the weight of her words. "Do you think I built this court by trusting men to accept shame? Then why invite them at all?" Kenshin's mouth barely moved. "Because I wanted to see who they truly are when they think the prize is guaranteed." He reached to the side and tapped a rolled scroll sealed with wax. "Before the trials began, I had each house press its seal to a witness scroll. It acknowledges your right to choose. It makes retaliation costly." Akemi breathed out, the fear still there, but shaped into something sharper. "So if I do this, you do it in daylight," Kenshin said. "Cleanly, without apology. And you understand the price." Akemi bowed, not as a child, but as a woman making a decision. "I understand." Kenshin picked up his brush again. "Then choose wisely. Because once you speak his name, you will not be able to unsay it." The fourth day brought an unusual demonstration. Kenshin announced it at breakfast, watching the reactions of the assembled samurai with the sharp eyes of a man who had spent decades reading men. "Today you will not fight. You will not debate. You will lead," he explained. A bridge in a nearby village had collapsed during the autumn rains. The villagers needed it rebuilt before winter made the river impassable. Each samurai would be given a section of the day to organize the work, demonstrating leadership and practical ability. "A samurai who cannot lead peasants cannot lead soldiers," Kenshin said. "Show me what kind of leader you are." The samurai exchanged glances. This was not what they had trained for. Sword forms and philosophical debates had clear rules, clear ways to excel. Organizing mud-covered peasants to lift stones was something else entirely, but none could refuse. Akemi traveled to the village with the formal procession, but once there, she slipped away and dressed in peasant clothes. She would observe from within, not above. Noboru took the first shift. He arrived with his attendants and immediately began issuing orders. The peasants should work faster. The stones should be larger. The progress was unacceptable. When a worker dropped a stone, Noboru's voice cut across the sight. "Are you trying to delay us? Pick it up. Move." The peasants worked, but their movements were tight, fearful. They watched Noboru more than they watched their work, afraid of drawing his displeasure. By the end of his shift, progress was minimal. The workers were exhausted not from labor, but from tension. Takumi took the second shift. His approach was more sophisticated. He organized the workers into teams, assigned specific tasks, and created a system. Efficient, logical, correct. But he never spoke to the workers directly. All orders went through his attendants. When he walked through the site, the peasants bowed and stepped aside, and he passed without acknowledgement. The work progressed, but Akemi noticed something. The workers did exactly what they were told, nothing more. No one offered suggestions. No one pointed out better approaches. They had learned that their input was not wanted. Kenji took the third shift. He approached it as a negotiation. Speaking with the village headman, he established what resources were available, what timeline was realistic, and what the peasants needed in exchange for their labor. Extra rice for the workers. Their families will not go hungry while they serve Lord Matsuda's guests. The headman agreed, surprised and pleased. The work continued with better morale. But Akemi noticed that Kenji never touched a single stone, never sweated alongside the men. He managed from a distance, like a merchant overseeing a transaction. Others rotated through the site as the day dragged on, each trying to perform leadership in his own style. Some barked orders. Some offered rehearsed kindness, but almost all of them kept their hands clean. By late afternoon, the bridge was still a wound, and the village still felt like an audience, not a partner. Then the ronin took his shift. Before he even spoke to the workers, Akemi saw movement near the collapsed span. A man in a samurai retainer's vest, not one of the villagers, crouched beside a support rope where the new beams had been staged. His hands worked quickly, too quickly, as if he had done this before. He loosened the knot, not enough to be obvious. Just enough that, under weight, the beam would shift. A failure that could be blamed on poor leadership, on peasant labor, on bad luck. A boy from the village ran forward to carry tools across the temporary planks. The beam creaked. The ronin's hand shot out and caught the boy by the collar, pulling him back without violence, without drama. He stared at the rope for one breath, then knelt and retied it with a sailor's certainty, tightening the knot until the fibers sang. He did not shout. He did not accuse. He simply looked up once, scanning the faces at the edge of the worksite. The retainer had already vanished into the crowd. The ronin rose, brushed dust from his palms, and only then turned to the workers as if nothing unusual had happened. What happened next would become a story the villagers told for years. The day a samurai remembered that his hands were not only for holding swords. The ronin arrived without attendants. He had none. He walked to where the workers were resting, waiting for the next set of orders. They looked at him with the wariness peasants always showed toward samurai, expecting commands, bracing for criticism. Instead, he sat down among them. "I know nothing about building bridges," he said, "but I can carry stones and mix mortar. Tell me where you need hands." The workers stared. A samurai asking them for direction? The village headman approached cautiously. "My lord, we could not ask you to. You are not asking. I am offering." The ronin stood and removed the upper part of his kimono, revealing a worker's simple undergarment. "My back is strong enough. Show me what to do." For the next 3 hours he worked. Not supervising. Not directing, working, carrying stones that cut his hands, mixing mortar until his arms ached, wading into the cold river to position supports. The peasants, after their initial shock, began to work differently. Faster, but not from fear. There was energy in their movements, something that looked almost like enthusiasm. Akemi, hidden among the workers, found herself assigned to carry water. She brought a bucket to where the ronin was lifting stones and watched him drink without recognizing her. "Thank you," he said, wiping his mouth. Just as he would thank any worker. "You are not like the others," she said, keeping her voice rough, her accent common. "I am exactly like the others. I simply remember what they have forgotten." "What is that?" "That the hands of a samurai are not too noble for honest work. That the people who grow our rice and build our roads are not lesser for doing so. That honor is not diminished by sweat." He handed back the cup and returned to his labor. By the end of his shift, more progress had been made than in the 3 previous shifts combined. Not because the ronin was a better organizer, because the workers had given something they had withheld from the others. Their genuine effort. Their willing participation. The difference between bodies that moved because they must and bodies that moved because they chose to. That night, she asked the village headman what he thought of the day's work. The first lord was frightening. The second was cold. The third was fair but distant. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The fourth one, the ronin. I do not have words for what he was. Try. He made us feel like we mattered. Not our labor, us. When was the last time a samurai made a peasant feel like a person instead of a tool? Akemi had no answer. She returned to the castle with a clearer picture than ever. 21 men had been tested. 20 had revealed themselves to be variations of the same fundamental assumption, that those below them existed to serve, not to be served. One had shown something different. But she needed more. One day of labor did not prove a lifetime of character. The final demonstration would be decisive. The fifth day brought the conclusion of the formal demonstrations, Bakken duels, paired by lot. Each samurai would face one opponent in a match that would test practical combat ability under pressure. The lots were drawn publicly to ensure fairness. When the ronin's name was paired with Ogawa Noboru, a murmur went through the crowd, the favorite against the nobody. The outcome seemed predetermined. Noboru smiled, pleased with his fortune. A chance to humiliate the interloper publicly, to demonstrate the natural order of things. The ronin's expression did not change. All afternoon, wooden blades cracked against wood. Men won, men lost, pride bruised and smiles forced. Some fights ended in seconds. Others dragged on until arms trembled and the crowd grew restless. But when the circle was cleared for Noboru and the nameless ronin, the noise thinned into something sharper. This was the match everyone would remember, not because it was fair, but because it was supposed to be inevitable. They faced each other in the dueling circle, Bakken raised. The arbiter called the start. Noboru attacked immediately, aggressively, seeking to overwhelm. His technique was excellent, refined through years of training with the finest instructors his family's wealth could provide. The ronin retreated, deflected, absorbed. He did not counterattack. Simply survived, reading Noboru's patterns, measuring his rhythms. The crowd watched with growing surprise. The ronin should have fallen in the first exchange. Instead, he was still standing, still moving, still present. Minutes passed. Noboru's attacks grew fiercer, frustrated by the lack of decisive victory. The ronin remained calm, his movements economical, his breathing steady. Akemi watched from the observation pavilion, seeing what others could not. The ronin was not inferior to Noboru. He was different. Where Noboru sought to dominate, the ronin sought to understand. Where Noboru attacked patterns, the ronin read them. He was waiting. For what? She did not yet know. Quick pause. If you're still watching, thank you. You're exactly the kind of viewer this channel is made for. And stay with me. Because the most dishonorable move is about to happen, and Akemi will see everything. If you haven't yet, hit like. It tells YouTube this story deserves a wider audience. And subscribe, because these legends only get darker and more satisfying. The exchange happened fast. Noboru pressed forward with a combination that should have been decisive. The ronin deflected, stepped back, and for a moment they were locked together, Bakken crossed, faces close. The arbiter raised his hand. Yame! Separate. The ronin immediately stepped back, lowering his Bakken in response to the command. Noboru did not stop. His Bakken continued its arc, striking the ronin on the side of the head with force that sent him staggering. Blood appeared at his ear, running down his neck. The crowd gasped. The arbiter froze. Noboru stepped back, raising his hands in practiced innocence. My apologies. The combat was intense. I did not hear the command in time. Silence fell over the dueling ground. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone knew the excuse was false. The arbiter had called clearly. Noboru had struck anyway, but Noboru was the favorite. The son of a powerful clan. Challenging his word meant challenging his family's honor, meant political consequences that no one wanted to face. The arbiter looked at the ronin, expecting protest, accusation, demand for disqualification. The ronin touched his ear, looked at the blood on his fingers. Then he looked at Noboru for a long moment. The combat was intense, he said quietly. These things happen. May we continue? Whispers erupted. He was absolving Noboru after a clear violation? Akemi understood immediately. If the ronin were accused, it would be his word against Noboru's. The arbiter would be forced to make a political judgment, and that judgment would not favor a nameless wanderer. The ronin would be seen as a man who could not accept a blow, who cried for justice when he should have simply endured. By absolving, he did something more devastating. He showed that Noboru's cheating had not mattered, had not affected him enough to require acknowledgement. The blow that should have been decisive was dismissed as irrelevant. The generosity was more humiliating than any accusation. The duel resumed, but something had changed. Noboru was unsettled, his rhythm disrupted by the ronin's unexpected response. He had expected rage, protest, an emotional opening to exploit. Instead, he faced the same calm presence as before, now marked with blood that the ronin seemed to have already forgotten. The ronin's attacks became slightly more aggressive. Not reckless, but probing, testing, reading. Then in a single moment, he found what he was looking for. Noboru launched an attack born of frustration rather than technique. The ronin sidestepped, deflected, and struck the inside of Noboru's wrist with precise force. The bakken flew from Noboru's hands, clattering on the ground. Silence. The ronin stepped back and lowered his weapon. The duel was over. For a moment, no one moved. The favorite, the expected winner, stood weaponless before a man with no name. Then the ronin did something unexpected. He bent, picked up Noboru's bakken, and offered it back to him with a formal bow. It was a good match. Noboru stared at the offered weapon. His face cycled through emotions: rage, humiliation, confusion. Finally, he snatched the bakken without returning the bow and stalked off the field. The ronin watched him go. Then he turned to the arbiter, bowed, and walked quietly back to his position at the edge of the other samurai. None of them moved to make room for him. He stood apart, as he had from the beginning, but something in the air had shifted. The laughter that had followed him since his arrival was absent now. In its place was something more uncomfortable. The realization perhaps they had misjudged. That evening, the formal selection ceremony was held. The great hall was filled to capacity. All 20 samurai knelt in perfect formation, armor polished, crests gleaming. Behind them, a notable distance away, the ronin knelt alone. Kenshin sat on the raised platform, Akemi at his side. The senior advisors arranged themselves according to rank. The collected nobility of the domain watched, waiting for the expected conclusion. Noboru would be chosen. Or perhaps Takumi, or Kenji. One of the great names, cementing one of the great alliances. No one doubted the outcome. Kenshin rose and addressed the assembly. For 5 days, these men have demonstrated their qualities: skill at arms, wisdom in debate, leadership in practice. They have shown what they believe makes them worthy of my daughter's hand. He turned to Akemi. The choice, as I promised, is yours. Speak your decision, and I will honor it. Akemi rose. The hall fell absolutely silent. She walked slowly down from the platform, her formal robes trailing behind her. She moved along the front row of samurai, looking at each one in turn. Noboru straightened, confident. She passed him without pausing. Takumi arranged his expression into humble readiness. She passed him as well. Kenji watched with calculating eyes, already planning his next move if she chose him. She did not stop. One by one, she passed all 20 samurai. The silence in the hall grew heavier with each step. She reached the end of the formation and kept walking. Toward the back. Toward the empty space where one man knelt alone. She stopped before the ronin. This one. For 3 heartbeats, no one breathed. Then the hall exploded. It wasn't only an outrage. It was mathematics. 20 banners had come expecting a marriage to lock their influence into Kenshin's bloodline. Some had stationed armed escorts outside the gates, not to wage war, but to be seen. With one word, Akemi had turned a celebration into a political fracture. Noboru surged to his feet, decorum forgotten. This is an insult. A mockery of everything. Silence. Kenshin's voice cut through the chaos. The authority of decades commanded instant obedience. The warlord descended from the platform, his face unreadable. He stopped before his daughter. Explain. Akemi turned to face the assembly. Her voice was calm, clear, reaching every corner of the hall. You ask me to explain? Very well, I will explain. She looked at Noboru. Ogawa Noboru. 3 nights ago, I walked through your quarters disguised as a servant. I heard you speak of me with your companions. You called me a horse to be broken, a woman to be tamed. You spoke of my intelligence as a flaw to be corrected. Noboru's face was drained of color. You performed the nobility in this hall, but your true nature emerged when you thought no one important was listening. A man who speaks so of his future wife is not a man I will marry. She turned to Takumi. Hayashi Takumi. I watched you berate a servant for bringing the wrong tea. You called him worthless, threatened him with beating. Your courtesy to nobles is flawless. Your cruelty to those beneath you is equally complete. Takumi opened his mouth to protest. No words came. A man who treats the powerless with contempt will treat his wife the same way. Once the ceremony is concluded, and there is no one left to impress, she moved through them, one by one. Saito Kenji, you spoke openly of my value as a key to my father's power. At least you were honest. But I am not a key. I am not a door. I am not a transaction. To another, you injured your horse through carelessness and blamed the animal. To another, you cheated in the archery demonstration. After you finished, I asked my father's bowyer to examine your bowstring under the pretense of routine inspection. It had been altered. I did not come here to win with theater, Akemi continued, her voice steady. So I will not speak about rumors. Only in what leaves a mark, a ledger, a witness, a pattern so consistent it becomes evidence. To another, in your household, 3 women live as guests with no family name, and the midwives in your own district whisper the same story every season. Children born, then erased. You refuse to acknowledge them, because admitting them would complicate your inheritance. To another, and today, at the bridge, one of your retainers loosened the support rope before the work began. I saw him. The villagers saw him. And when my father's men inspected the staging after the shift, they found the knot half given, meant to fail under weight. You were willing to let peasants bleed, just so a nameless man would stumble. A samurai who endangers the powerless to protect his pride is not a samurai. He is a coward wearing armor. With each revelation, the hall grew quieter. The assembled nobility watched one of their own dissect the carefully maintained illusions of 20 powerful families. Finally, Akemi turned back to the ronin. And this man, she said. What did I observe of him? She paused, letting the question hang. I observed him before any of you knew he existed. Murmurs of confusion. 1 month ago, I was traveling alone on the mountain road. Bandits attacked me. This man appeared. He killed 2 of them and drove off the others. He escorted me to safety. She looked at the ronin, who knelt motionless, his face revealing nothing. He did not know who I was. I was dressed as a common woman. There was nothing to gain from helping me. He did it because it was right. Then he disappeared, asking nothing in return. When he arrived at this competition, he did not know I was the woman from the road. He still does not know, unless he has guessed. He did not come here seeking to find me. He came because, in his words, something about 20 men speaking of honor while treating their servants as invisible troubled him enough to act. She turned back to the assembly. For 5 days, I watched all of you. I watched how you treated those who could not benefit you. I watched what you did when you thought no one important was observing. I watched the difference between who you performed and who you were. Her voice hardened. You asked what makes this man worthy. I answer, he was the same person in every moment. The same man who saved a stranger on a mountain road. The same man who thanked a servant by name. The same man who worked beside peasants in the mud. The same man who absorbed a dishonorable blow and offered forgiveness instead of accusation. He did not perform nobility for my benefit. He simply was noble, in every action, whether witnessed or not. She looked at her father. You gave me the power to choose. This is my choice. Not the strongest, not the wealthiest, not the most politically valuable. The only one who passed the only test that matters. Being human when no one was watching. Kenshin stood motionless. His advisors watched with barely concealed horror. The political calculations were devastating. 20 clans insulted. 20 alliances lost, for a ronin with nothing to offer. One advisor leaned close and whispered urgently. Kenshin raised a hand, silencing him. He looked at his daughter, at the assembled samurai, at the ronin who had not moved, had not spoken, had not reacted in any visible way. You understand, Kenshin said slowly, what this choice means. The alliances we will lose, the enemies we may create. You are asking me to put your judgment above the security of our domain. I am asking you to honor your word, Akemi replied. You said the choice was mine. You said it before witnesses. If you reverse that now, what is your word worth? What is the Matsuda name worth, if it can be broken when keeping it becomes inconvenient? The hall held its breath. Kenshin was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Not mockingly, with something that sounded almost like pride. You are too much like me, he said. Seeing what others miss. Acting on what you see. It will cause you pain, as it has caused me pain. He turned to face the assembly. My daughter has made her choice. I gave my word that her choice would be honored. A man who breaks his word has no honor, and a lord without honor has no right to rule. He looked at the ronin directly. Stand, the ronin rose. If he was surprised by the turn of events, he showed no sign. You have been chosen to marry my daughter. What do you say? The ronin was silent for a moment. Then he spoke. Lord Matsuda, I did not come here seeking this. I did not expect this. I do not know if I am worthy of the honor your daughter has offered. He looked at Akemi. But I know that what she saw in me, whatever it was, she saw was true. I am what I am, without pretense. If that is enough, then I will spend whatever years remain trying to be worthy of her judgment. He turned back to Kenshin. I have nothing to offer but myself. If that is acceptable, then I accept. The 20 samurai departed in varying states of outrage. Some would become enemies. Some would retreat into humiliated silence. A few, perhaps, would reflect on what had been revealed and find something valuable in the exposure of their flaws. Noboru left first, his retinue packing with furious efficiency. He did not look at anyone as he passed through the gates. The story would follow him for the rest of his life. The man who was passed over for a ronin. The man whose cruelty was exposed by the woman he thought he would own. The political consequences arrived quickly, exactly as Kenshin had predicted. Before the trials began, each household had pressed its seal onto a witness scroll, acknowledging Akemi's right to choose and agreeing that any retaliation would be treated as open defiance of the Warlord's court. 2 clans withdrew their envoys in fury. A third tightened trade along the border for a season. Rumors reached neighboring provinces, painted as scandal or legend, depending on who told the tale. But just as many lords adjusted quietly, realizing something had changed. Kenshin valued character over spectacle, and the old games no longer guaranteed power. Alliances shifted. New relationships formed. The world did not end, but it did rearrange itself. The wedding was small, deliberately modest. No grand ceremony with hundreds of guests. No elaborate display of wealth and power. Just the essential rituals witnessed by those who mattered. Akemi found the ronin, her husband now, though she still thought of him by the absence of a name rather than the name he had finally offered, in the garden the evening after the ceremony. You are quiet, she said, sitting beside him on the stone bench. I am often quiet. You may have noticed. I noticed many things. That is why we are here. He smiled slightly. It was an expression she had rarely seen from him, and it changed his face in ways that surprised her. May I ask you something? You are my wife now. You may ask anything. When did you recognize me? From the mountain road. He was silent for a moment. The moment you asked your question, during the wisdom demonstration. Why did you come here? The voice was different, but the way you asked. You wanted a real answer, not a correct one. Only one person had ever asked me a question like that before. You knew, and you said nothing. What was there to say? If you wanted me to know who you were, you would have told me. You did not tell me because you were testing whether I was the same man without the knowledge. He paused. Was I? Akemi considered the question. Yes, you were exactly the same. That was why I chose you. I have wondered about that. You could have revealed yourself at any point. Made your selection simpler. Why the elaborate test? Because I needed to know. Not just that you were good, but that you were consistently good. That the man who saved me on the road was not performing for some reason I had missed. And if I had been different here? If I had shown myself to be like the others, then I would have known the mountain road was the performance, and this was the truth. And I would have chosen differently. He nodded slowly, accepting this. You took a great risk. Defying your father's expectations. Insulting powerful clans. All for a man you had known for a few hours across weeks of separation. Yes. Why? Akemi looked out at the garden, at the evening light filtering through the maples. Because I spent my entire life watching people perform. Watching them say correct things and do corrupt things. Watching the distance between their words and their actions grow so wide that the words became meaningless. She turned to face him. You were the first person I ever met who was the same in every moment. The same alone on a mountain road. The same surrounded by enemies who mocked you. The same bleeding from a wound that should have provoked rage. The same after victory as before. I am not a saint. I have failures you have not seen. I am sure you do, but your failures are probably honest failures. Mistakes, not deceptions. I can live with mistakes. I cannot live with pretense. They sat in silence for a while. The garden settled into the evening around them. I should tell you, he said finally, that I did not come to the selection hoping to win you. I came because I was angry at the arrogance of the others and too stubborn to let that anger go unexpressed. I know. You are not offended? Why would I be? You came for honest reasons, even if they were not romantic reasons. That honesty led to honest actions. The outcome is the same. And now? What do you expect from this marriage? Akemi considered the question seriously. I expect partnership. I expect truth, even when truth is uncomfortable. I expect you to be who you are, not who you think I want you to be. That is not what most marriages offer. We are not most marriages, she smiled slightly. We are a warlord's daughter who judges men by how they treat servants, and a ronin who entered a competition he had no intention of winning. Normal was never an option for us. He laughed. A real laugh, quiet but genuine. Then we will build something abnormal. Something honest. Yes, that is exactly what we will do. The evening deepened around them. In the castle behind them, servants moved through corridors, preparing for the night. The sounds of a household finding its rhythm after an unusual day. Somewhere in the quarters of the departed samurai, the story was already spreading, already being shaped into legend. The daughter who chose the man without a name. The ronin who won by not trying to win. The judgment that valued character above crest. Years later, when the story was told to children, it would carry a simple lesson. What you do when no one is watching is who you truly are. And sometimes, someone is always watching. And now I'm going to ask you one final question. Was Akemi brave? Or reckless? Comment brave or reckless. And if you want your next story right now, click the video on screen. The next legend begins with a choice even sharper than this one.